No matter what your financial goals are in life, if you can understand and take control of these 4 numbers, I have no doubt that you will become ridiculously rich. Ramit Sethi, who famously wrote the book I Will Teach You to Be Rich, categorizes these 4 numbers perfectly. And I agree with most of them, but there's gonna be a little bit of a twist that I'm gonna throw on them, especially if your goal is to build wealth. And I just think that you could profit so much more. I have my little production assistant, who's usually behind the scenes but wanted to be on camera for this one, help teach you about these 4 very important numbers and how much of your paycheck that you should put towards each one every single month. I'm going to give you the breakdown of my exact numbers in each category as well, and I think that's enough time in the spotlight for my little guy. I don't want it to get to his head. I'm Nolan Govea, my students call me Professor G, and I made this channel to make investing simplified. So let's simplify your entire personal finance strategy.
There's 4 numbers that I really like to track. I track these myself, and these are the numbers I encourage. The first is your fixed costs. Okay. Those would be your rent or your mortgage, your any debt payments, groceries, the money that you are spending every single month that is essentially fixed. And the number I recommend for that is 50 to 60% of your take-home pay. So that would be, if you're spending 50 to 60% of what you make, what you take home on your rent, your groceries, any debt payments, your car, you're in good shape.
So like he said, things like rent or mortgage or car payments or utilities, things that you have to do and pay month in and month out. He recommends that you keep this number to under 60% of your total take-home pay, and I'd like to see that number under 50%. If that number is too high, you'll never be able to save enough money or invest enough money to get you to financial freedom. Nowadays, people are spending more than ever because it's just too easy to spend more than ever. Credit cards are so easy, payment plans are so easy, buy now, pay later stuff is way too easy. There's a reason that many people who make over $100,000 per year are still living paycheck to paycheck. There's a reason why we as a country are at a point where we have the most amount of debt that we've ever had in our history. If you spend too much here, then it's a snowball effect for the rest of your finances. So when making any huge purchases, be very disciplined here. Like for a house or even renting a new apartment, make sure that you keep the mortgage or rent to under 30% of your take-home monthly. For a car payment, try to keep that under 10 to 15% of your take-home monthly. Those two are going to make the biggest difference. Stopping spending at Starbucks once per week on a latte is not really going to move the needle as much as people think. Now moving on to the next number, he speaks about this one specifically when he's talking about savings, and I like this, but I'm going to have a little bit of a twist on this.
Okay, the next one is your savings. That would be roughly 5 to 10%. Savings would be things like an emergency fund, savings for a down payment, for a car, things like that.
So he says to save 5 to 10%, which is great, I agree with that. But once you get to about 6 months worth of living expenses saved and put into a high yield savings account, it might be time to back off on that just a little bit. Some of you want to be extra safe and have a year's worth of living expenses in a savings account. That's great. Figure out what your risk profile is and go hit your goal. But once you get to a point where you have 6 months or more of living expenses in a high yield savings account, you know that you're covered if you're to lose a job or anything like that for that amount of time. I think you can definitely find a job within that period of time, so you're safe enough. We don't want you to be doing something called over-saving. If you start putting in more money every single month to your savings account, you might build that thing up, but you could be putting that somewhere way better that's going to get you to financial freedom so much quicker. Now, the only time that I would increase that savings as much as possible is if you have something very specific that you're saving for and within a time period. Like if you're trying to save for the down payment of a house or even a car. Remember, from before, those are going to be the 2 biggest things and biggest purchases and probably payments each month, so you do want to do the best there. You definitely wouldn't want that type of money sitting in the stock market because there is risk and that money could go down, and if you need it in the next year or two, that's not the best place for it. Moving on to the third number, and this one's all about investments, so this one is a fun one.
Third is investments. This is where the real wealth is created. And for this, 5 to 10% of take home is fine. Of course, the more you put in, the more you're going to have.
Again, he says 5 to 10% here, and I'm going to add my own spin to that. 5 to 10% should be the goal right now if you invest very little or none at all. It should also be the goal that you are consistent in whatever you choose. Most people just invest whatever money they have left over at the end of the month. When it comes to the end of the month, and very seldom do they actually have any money that they could invest with, because they spent it. It's very hard to stay disciplined and not spend money that's just sitting there, and it's especially hard to take that money, put it in something that you know you're not going to touch for the next 20 years. Delaying gratification is just a very hard thing to do. So step 1 in this investing column would be to figure out a number that you can commit to. Maybe just start with a hard number like $100 per month. And make this happen before you start spending on things by automating this. If you go into your investing account and you automate it so that on the 5th of each month, it takes $100 out of your checking account and puts it directly into the investing account, now you won't be tempted because it's there, and then you just need to invest that money. Now, if you're in a different category and you have been investing a bit each month and you're pretty comfortable investing 5 to 10%, now it's time for you to take this challenge and increase that. I would say that you need to get this up over 10%, so 10 to 20% would be solid, especially if your goal is financial freedom in any foreseeable future. The thing that makes you the most amount of money in investing long term is the amount of capital you're able to put in. If you invest $100 per month for 20 years at a crazy appreciation rate of 15% per year, you'd have $123,000. If you invest $1,000 per month for 20 years in something more conservative that gets half that appreciation at only 8% per year, you'd have $550,000. So it's less about what you invest in and more so about consistency and staying the course. Now, quick disclaimer here, not all ETFs or investments are created equal, and there are some pretty bad ones, so if you don't know where to start, I have some videos down in my description on some good solid ETFs, and that's where I recommend that you start your research by far. At the end of this video, I'll queue up a video on my favorite ETF, so you don't even have to go anywhere, it'll be right there for you. The last number here is surprising to most, but I couldn't agree more with him. And after I explain this number, I'm going to give you my breakdown on what I think your percentages should be and tell you what my percentages are currently.
And then the fourth category, the one I love the most, is called guilt-free spending. This is going out for cocktails in New York. It's buying a beautiful shirt. It's treating your friends, whatever you love, yoga, 20 to 35% of your take-home pay.
So guilt-free spending. Crazy concept, but so important. I've owned multiple businesses in the health and fitness industry and have been a health enthusiast for years. I've worked with hundreds of clients, and the ones that actually get to their goal are the ones that practice this specifically. Now, there are some people who just cut super hard. They take out all carbs and all sugar and just work out 5 hours a day, and they get results very quickly. But then they burn out, and then they usually put on exactly the same amount of weight within a couple of weeks. They're right back to where they started. The ones that are successful are the ones that cut out bad carbs and that stick to a consistent workout regimen and just keep everything nice and steady. I work out 5 or 6 days a week, and I have been doing that for 20 years. I eat pretty clean and boring, as most of my friends would say, but I'll eat some pizza watching a football game or enjoy some ice cream or frozen yogurt with my girlfriend some nights. These types of things give me a little taste or a treat, and it keeps me going so that I don't feel like I'm missing out, but I can definitely stick with my goals. Same thing with finances, but even more so, especially if you cut all of your fun spending. You're gonna have some extra money to pay off debt or to be able to invest with, but after a little while, you're gonna be like, well, what about me? I wanna buy this cool thing. And then you'll be right back into your patterns. So keeping some fun in your spending is very important. Now, he suggests 20 to 35% of your take-home pay. I'd like to see you down closer to the lower end of that spectrum. I definitely don't get anywhere near 20% in my budget. I'm probably closer to like 5%. But take an honest assessment of where you are today. If you're spending something like 40% here, try to bring that down to 20%. And if you're spending like 0% here, try to bring that up to 5%. I think a very healthy and sustainable range can be between 5 and 20%. So what type of a breakdown should you do, in my opinion? I'm gonna tell you that and then tell you my breakdown at the end. So first, for you, especially starting out or trying to tighten that belt, this is what I'd shoot for. As far as fixed costs, try to get it as close to 50% as possible. Your savings should be somewhere around 15%. Investing, if we can get that close to 15%, that would be amazing. And then guilt-free spending around 20%. Now, for those of you with a higher income, or maybe more disposable income at least, yours might look a little more like mine possibly, but this is what mine looks like. As far as fixed costs, it's between 30 and 40%. My savings rate is about 10%. Investing is about 35%. Guilt-free spending is closer to 5 to 10%. And then I should have started with this, but tithe is 10%. Like I mentioned before, you want to be investing in the right things. You're going to have a lot of cash freed up if you take what I just explained and actually put it into practice. So here are 2 videos on some ETFs that I highly recommend that you check out and research deeply to get you closer to that goal of ultimate financial freedom.